We're here to talk through this castle wall hex puzzle I wrote, and this was an example of a learning experience for me where the number of degrees of freedom in a castle wall hexagonal grid is so high. You also have to then, at least in a geometry like this, which is pretty open, so I only have a few clues to touch, I had to give almost all of these numbers. I think I might have been able to remove 2 of these clues, but the 34 numbers given, which is a fairly high count, ended up making this puzzle harder. You might not think more clues makes it harder. What it actually ended up doing was obscuring some of my intended break-ins because there's just now so much more information around that's, at least till the end of the puzzle, more noise than signal. One of the places, let me just give you an example, the very start of my grid, without even knowing what all these things would be, was with these central hexagonal colors already set, and recognizing I was defining based off white and black some cells that the loop would absolutely pass through, like these. Sorry, didn't mean to color that. And some cells it wasn't passing through, like these red lines. And it's not to say you're not potentially using those cells. Like, you can come into the cell, you have to quickly turn away from the cell. You can't cross this, though, because of the same colors here. So like this path and this path don't work. This is fine. This is fine. And not using the cell at all is also fine. So how did the first break-in go? And this is not the first break-in that you end up using as a solver. It was looking to a cell like this. So the loop has to come to and through this cell. And it will take either this hexagonal path or this diagonal path. And the very first 2 numbers I wrote in my grid were this clue and this clue, which point at this cell. And we're going to take one of these up or down edges. We're going to take one of these upper right or lower right, upper left or lower right direction segments. We can't take anything else in these directions because we'll have to use those 2 line segments to make the whole path work. And so this was something I had hid at the start of this grid that no solver will find until the middle of the grid, because again, there are just so many number clues that makes an observation like this trickier to spot. But it is an example of how, when you're first getting started, you may intend a break-in to be in your puzzle, but you should always reevaluate at the end if some of the break-ins are there and easy to see at the end. And this ended up as a 5-star puzzle, a little harder than I wanted, but it was a case where those reevaluations might have sort of changed that later on. A lot in this grid and a lot in any castle wall grid is just set by the colors, so let's sort of mark those right away. Places we can't cross over boundaries, places we must cross over boundaries. I'm going to probably miss a few as I just go through this, but got to come through here, we can't come through here, got to come through here, can't come through here, do come through this set and this set, not through these. We've got to come up this channel across these cells so that these are interior, but with this X marked from that complex yellow, we can actually fulfill this 3 down clue in the early stages of this grid. Mark this into the space. Are there any more cells? Again, I probably missed a couple, but I think that's a lot on the exterior. And we've got these sort of orange cells are crossing over. Some of the sets of clues I was expecting solvers to use are in these central columns. And so we'll start by looking at them. They're not all easy, but the centermost column is easy. At the top, it has just 2 edges left once you know to mark this off, so that 6 is fulfilled. This 4 in the center has to take these, and this 2 still has an either or option. So a lot you can do around that, but at this moment we know these for sure. They set up a little around the 7 and 6 to the left, so here are 2 numbers pointing at each other, but with a difference in count. We need 1 extra on the bottom than at the top, so that's going to be forced, and then we need to get 6 in the space. And if you're thinking about how these red lines work, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 edges along the space, and I can only take one of these edges, either this bottom one or the top one. So everything else in green is good. And I have, in this case, a cell I have to reach into from the right, and marking this edge off marks this edge in. This has to quickly turn. That 6 is fulfilled on the bottom, and also the 7 is fulfilled at the top, so we'll color those off. And we'll use green for the white cells that are finished. We'll use purple for the black cells that are finished, and mark these in this way. Next kind of not easy to spot deduction, but a fun deduction I wanted to hide in this puzzle is actually that this 6 up clue on the right side, just off the center, is also as usable now as the 6 to the left. And you might say, well, I've got this extra degree of freedom, it takes this or not. Well, turns out you're actually more limited in the center. So you still have a challenge here. You have one of these that must be left unused. I'll just put it up here. It's not actually for sure up here versus there, but one of these 2 edges can't be taken. And the other has to do across this whole swath here, and it has to do with the fact that this loop end is turning in the right into the cell. So if it comes to this top cell, it can't take both of these ends, so it can only take one vertically. And if it comes to this cell, it can only take one of these, not both of these vertically. So across this, this, and this, one of these will also be missing. And I don't know which of those it will be. But again, 2 are missing in the center. That means I must take this top. I must take this edge, which isn't anywhere near those missing bits. I must take this edge, which isn't anywhere near those missing bits. And why some of that is helpful to mark is as we actually put some other info into the grid, it's going to force something to the top here. It's going to cascade into another clue. So let's, before we jump through the hardest bits, although these center columns were one of the places I wanted solvers to solve, let's not miss some of the things everyone will have looked at. The 0 clues, let's mark those off. That actually completes this channel, Now with this line segment, you get to where you've done this. That actually completes this one. And so this clue in green is done, this 1 is done. These 0s are done. And some more different places to look. Another set of symmetric clues meant to be the same logic, but probably solvers didn't find them symmetrically, are these corners. As soon as you mark this central line, you have cut off 1, 2 edges in either of these directions from the center, and you're now left with just 2 edges that can be used. And so this line and this line and this line and this line are meant to be somewhat early. And you actually still should be careful, like this and this are still options up here, and they're still here, this is still an option down there, but we have fulfilled these 2 arrows with at least what information they held. Another symmetric clues to look at, this 3 up pointing into a 1 down, or this 3 down pointing to 1 up, meant to give you, again, an extremes. 2 must be above, none below. Over here, 2 must be below, none above. In this case, I'm going to pull out a new kind of notation. I'm going to mark this cell in blue in the center here. What I know about this cell is I've got to take one of the edges that's either up or down. That's going to fulfill the finish of this clue, but the other is going to have to be turning. So at least be aware that blue is used and it has a vertical edge is something I'm meaning. I'm kind of using the color to say refer back to some arrow that's pointing at it because there's something special about those cells. So where else to kind of go now? Well, still a lot of options. So one of the things with this puzzle is, at least in this mid-game, there's a lot to do. Let's use some of these exterior clues and just recognize we've got some cells we can't reach into. Like we can't come to the cell anymore, which means where does this 1 to the upper right come from? It has to take this edge. That puts these in. I don't know which this does, but I've now actually fulfilled this 2 up clue. And for the colors of this loop to work out, this has to turn to the right and not to the left. This is no good. So this closes, that means this comes up and over. And so we've got this now as a fulfilled clue, and this is a fulfilled clue. Got 3 down here, and again, on this edge, here are some cells we can't go to. I can come to here, but I can't come to these, so this 3 down has to come through those open cells. It forces this turn, and I still have some options here, but I'm not coming into this cell from this side. This cell being marked off also helps with this 2 to the lower right clue. So this has to take this edge and this edge to work. This has to turn down based off other info in the grid at this moment, particularly from this clue. This has to turn in with 2 ends up here. This end also has to turn in. So that looks like good progress. This end has to turn up based off things we've marked. Still have flexibility here, but now let's kind of look at some clues we've never looked at. One of the things, again, with having 34 number clues is there'll be a lot of clues you've never looked at. Let's see, like this, let's just come from the left. This 1 down is fulfilled at this stage. That looks fine. This 3 to the upper right still has lots of options, not looking there, but this 3 up looks suspicious. And that's because it started, even in this grid, with, I guess, 5 options for it, but 1 would always hit this wall. These down here hit this wall. So how does this look right now? I can take one of these 2, and then I can take a second and a third, and I'm out. Like I really am done having marked those in. So I must take what I've marked in green. I'm still figuring out what's going on here. And this is a case where these diagonal lines may clue you into the next place to be looking. And absolutely so. This 2 to the upper left has now fulfilled the options for that space. We can mark all these edges off. That will give us something here, and it's also going to help us with this end. So let's, before we go too far, let's kind of go through all the deductions. This must come down. We said again we had 1 that's coming from this center space. So that now means this edge can't come up. This has to come this way. This cell only has 1 place we could enter it, so it's not able to be entered. So this is how the top of this hexagon looks, and this is the one from this side. This is the one from the top side. These ends will come together, but they still have a little bit of play, but we've now fulfilled a set of these clues in the grid, so we'll mark these in. We fulfilled this. This line segment actually fulfilled the 3 up clues, so this now is forcible as just the shape. We're now at a stage where actually this 3 to the upper right now is more constrained. We actually didn't use any of these ends in this hexagon, so I actually only see 3 segments for it to get finished. So let's draw those in. That completes this set up top. It puts this in down here and is looking pretty good, so we'll mark it off. And I said probably a minute or so ago, like this 2 diagonal clue also meant I had learned something here. So that edge from the center coming up into the right means that one of these 2 cells is what's not taken, but this is absolutely taken. Notice we're now through the orange channel, so I've got to come through here, or this is going to work. I got to come through this orange channel somehow to make this work, and I still have one more cell to take, but notice I've marked it impossible to come from the top, so this has to come from the bottom. Puts these in, and that looks like it's going to give us actually in another diagonally adjacent direction some good quick progress. So let's carefully mark what we've now finished and know. And one of the things we just did was marked off one of these edges that this big 5 clue is pointing at. We've never looked at that 5 before, but we're not coming back into this space. Just be aware of that. So how do I get 5 edges here? I've got 1, and I can take 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got to take all of those. Again, we're now like very much following the constructor's path as I'm talking through a puzzle I wrote. In getting this to work out, this one up now has to take this edge, so these are known and fulfilled. We did finish that 2 to the upper left clue, and we don't have to look back at it so much. We've not looked at this 1 to the upper left clue, and it looks like it's going to be in this space. We haven't looked at this 1 to the lower right clue. It may have to be in this space, but we have finished this. How is this 4 looking? This 4 is finished, and we have to quickly turn down. This end is going to have to turn in and up. We're not coming all the way to here, so I've got this 4 up I've not looked at, but I need to take this edge and this edge or I don't get to 4. So those are all forced. Here, I haven't looked at this 2 to the upper right. This looks key. It's marking off this cell. That means this turns this way. And now we are looking at this 1 to the lower right clue. We've actually now finished that clue. So these ends don't work. This has to turn this way, this way. We've got something curious setting up here. I've got an end that's going to turn out, but I've got an either or set. So let's look back at this loop and see that this is the one place in this puzzle where we've got a little bit of the loop, like all of this. This is actually a mess, sorry. This end in brown, if I chase it all the way over here, is this end in brown, so these can't join. So I've got to take this end. That means this comes up, this comes over. In doing that, I've fulfilled a lot of the other clues. So this 1 is done, this 1 is done. We already said this 4 is done, this 3 is done. This 2 over here is done. So I think I've got 2 clues left to think about, 2 to the lower left and 1 down. And this 2 to the lower left is the more key clue in the space. And so what this will have to deal with is recognizing this end and this end join, and this end and this end joined. But can we really cross over this line? If we cross over this line, we have an odd number of ends in 2 spaces. So this 2 to the lower left is forcing uniqueness in the last parts of this puzzle by putting these ends in. That closes out here and here. This 1 down clue now no longer can take this end. It puts in this, and this join will finish the puzzle, which was a bit of a workout, but hopefully you got a sense from the constructor's view of how this grid was written and how even the first place I was looking, like the cell in yellow, was not anywhere near the first place solvers would go, but trying to put in some symmetric placements like these central columns, like this 2 and this 2 that work together, the 3 and 1 to work together. I was trying to put a set of common seeds to help solvers out. But my guess is having 34 number clues was just a whole lot of noise with not as much signal, and that's how this puzzle ends up testing like a 5-star difficulty. It's just a lot to work through. And so I will try the very next time, if I ever do make another castle wall hex puzzle, to play up a different order of these shapes, particularly the clue location, so we have a lot less flexibility at key stages. But for now, first and probably last castle wall hex puzzle. Hope you enjoyed watching this video from the constructor side and got some solving tips as well of ways to look out for this puzzle. Definitely like things like these line segments in red are good things to notate in this geometric style to keep track of everything in the grid. So thanks, and we'll see you again soon.